That was the hardest bit, really. By the time Christmas Eve came around, you're ready to have your legs cut off. It's just cut the things off and let me out of here. It was gas gangrene was killing you. Couldn't have any more antibiotics. It was killing your liver. Your whole body shutting down. And so the only thing you can do is just cut them off and let me out of here. The only problem is you wake up the next day and it's Christmas Day, and you look down the bed and the sheets end halfway down. That's when you realise you never quite know what something is like in life until it actually happens to you.
Hello, beautiful people. On today's podcast, we have the determined Mark Inglis. In 1982, at the age of just 23, Mark became trapped in an ice cave for 14 days with a fellow mountaineer by a sub-zero blizzard on the summit of New Zealand's highest peak. Both starving and freezing, Mark lost 30 kilograms and slowly watched as his feet were overcome by frostbite. This frostbite, upon being rescued, led to Mark becoming a double amputee below the knee. In the year 2000, Mark became the first New Zealand silver medalist in cycling in the Paralympic Games. And in 2006, he became the world's first double amputee to summit Mount Everest. Mark is a scientist, award-winning winemaker, business innovator, trekking guide, and philanthropist, being the founding trustee of the Limbs for All charity, which is committed to helping some of the 400 million disabled people in the world express their potential. What I personally love about this conversation is Mark's deep determination in life. It is so fascinating to hear of the mindset behind surviving 14 days in such dire circumstances, the importance of knowledge, of faith, and of having confidence in a compelling future. I'm also really inspired by the self-belief that pulled Mark to take on climbing Mount Everest as a double amputee. This idea of, even though it hasn't been done, does not mean it cannot. And I love Mark's focus on attitude and how you yourself have control of how long the hard parts in life last. If you are enjoying this podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with friends and family, become part of the To Be Human Collective, and I am certain you will learn something new about how to not only survive, but how to thrive with the experienced Mark Inglis. Welcome to the To Be Human podcast, Mark.
Oh, thank you, Jenna. It's a beautiful day here in New Zealand, an absolute stunner.
It's beautiful over here in Australia as well, so we can certainly be grateful for that. So, Mark, where I normally start with our podcast is I'll use a quote sort of as a conversation starter. And there was something that I heard you say that I just thought was so beautifully expressed that I would like to share. And it was in relation to 1982 and sort of that experience that was quite life-defining for you. And you said, "You had to stay very still. We watched as our feet froze. Frostbite won't kill you, but hypothermia will. You had to sacrifice your feet for your life. Great choices come through knowledge." So I would love for you to take us back, Mark, to that moment in 1982 and that very life-defining experience.
Well, I guess it wasn't just a moment, Jenna. It was like a continuum. It started on the evening of the 15th of November and then into the morning of the 16th of November. Phil, a new team member, I was a search and rescue mountaineer at Mount Cook, I had the boys' own job. It was as your job, your sport, your culture, all sort of wrapped up into one. And then as an added bonus, I spent nearly all my time rescuing Australians. It was like, woohoo, found a use for them. It was fantastic, And so it was. I had the ultimate job as a search and rescue mountaineer, and we had this new team member. So we did a climb of the east ridge of Aoraki, Mount Cook. The conditions were really difficult. We thought we had 24 hours. We came across the top. The storm had arrived 12 hours earlier. Just all these things were adding up and adding up and adding up. And, we tried to get off the mountain, but, the storm was just ramping up in intensity. And so the only thing we could do was to get out of the wind, because the one thing that allows you to survive is knowledge. And most people that die in the mountains in New Zealand, and it's very similar in Australia in your Alps as well, especially in winter, is hypothermia. It's the cold that kills. And if you don't fall off something and kill yourself, then the cold will do it for you. And so you've got to get out of the wind. And there's a crevasse right just under the summit of Aoraki, Mount Cook. We crawled into it and we thought, good, out of the wind, it's wait 30 minutes, the weather will improve. It's New Zealand. And it didn't. It was 24 hours, and 24 hours turned into 48, turned into 5 days, turned into 13 and a half days. No sleeping bags, virtually no food, not a lot of anything really. We were climbing light and climbing fast. And really the only thing we had in our pocket were two things really. One was knowledge on how to survive, and the other was complete faith in our team. It was 324 hours. It's at over 1 million seconds, 1,166,000 or something seconds, and each one feels like an hour, because in every one of them you're worrying that one of your team will get hurt or killed trying to get you. It's the ultimate embarrassment for a professional. It's being rescued by your own search and rescue team. It's like, crikey. And so it was that focus that you need. And part of that focus was no clothes, no like sleeping bag, not a lot of food. So you can't eat snow. So you have no fluids, because otherwise it just chills you from the inside out.
Wow.
And without enough clothes, you can't move around because you have no food, and you haven't got any calories to burn. And you burn almost the same number of calories as a rider on the Tour Down Under, as they head out of Adelaide each day, 7,000 calories a day, just lying dead still at -20. And it was a wee bit like a Discovery Channel program on frostbite, and it was playing at the end of my feet. And it was just like, that you have to lie absolutely dead still so you don't get hypothermia, but you will get frostbite. After 3 days, the big toe had frozen. After 5 days, our 4 feet, we were both in exactly the same situation. Our 4 feet had frozen. From that moment onwards, we knew the only thing that we could do to survive was lie absolutely dead still until we were rescued, because we couldn't physically climb. I lost almost 70% of my body weight. I went from 71 kilos down to 39.
Wow.
Lying in that little ice cave. Yeah, don't see Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig advertising that, do you? Hey? Come on. Yeah.
There's probably some extremists out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do not try this at home.
Yeah.
But that we survived. You can survive without food, but the thing you can't survive without is water. And so as time went on, we were going through renal failure. And so 13 and a half days, only peed twice.
Wow.
And so the kidneys were shutting down. We were probably 12 to 18 hours away from death when we were rescued on the 29th of November, 1982. But and the weather went bad almost, I think, 2 or 3 hours after we were helicoptered off the summit of Aoraki, Mount Cook, and it went bad for 19 days.
Wow.
So you always give thanks to every little bit of luck you get. Yeah. And so that was, even then going to hospital, we thought we'd just lose our toes and we'd be back climbing by Christmas. Occupational hazard as a mountaineer, lose a toe here or there, lose the odd finger. But it rapidly came to understand that it was going to be a lot more. As we lay in hospital and just watched your feet rot, really. And that was pretty hard. That was the hardest bit, really. By the time Christmas Eve came around, you're ready to have your legs cut off. It's just cut the things off and let me out of here. It was gas gangrene was killing you. Couldn't have any more antibiotics. It was killing your liver. Your whole body's shutting down. And so the only thing you can do is just cut them off and let me out of here. The only problem is you wake up the next day and it's Christmas Day, and you look down the bed and the sheets end halfway down. That's when you realise you never quite know what something is like in life until it actually happens to you. And it's like click, 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 reset the clock and start again. But you'd have to say that the best person to ever have their legs cut off at the age of 23 is probably a young mountaineer, because you've just spent your whole life putting yourself in positions that if you make the wrong move, it might kill you. And so you have to have that extra self-confidence gene to be able to do what you do, that understanding that training overcomes fear, that knowledge overcomes fear. If you get to the stage of absolute fear, you know you're going into something that you have never experienced, never trained for, never envisaged. And so it's just another challenge to in many ways. But it's always a lot harder on your family. It's a lot harder on your friends, because they don't necessarily have that same view that you have on the inside looking out. They have a very different view of someone that's being seriously disabled on outside looking in.
Yeah, I truly respect you, Mark, in all of your mindset and certainly so many of the things that you shared. I want to take us back to you in that cave, because I think there's something so profound and special about being able to live through such an experience. And I'd love for you to share, what was going through your mind? I know you were confident in the team that was coming to rescue you, but as you said, sort of on the final day, you felt like you only had around 18 hours or so to live. What were you thinking in that moment? What was sort of the thing that got you to hold on until the very not till the end, but until you did come and get rescued?
Well, up until about the 5th day, it was trying to get out every day, and listening, and Phil and I were always bantering between each other. Shall we go? Shall we go? One of us would have a go, and you'd get flicked around like a kite by the wind, and you crawl back in, and you think, we'll try again a bit later. And then as our strength was waning, as our feet where you get a massive swelling, edema from behind the frostbite, because your body's trying to pump all the fluids, and it's all frozen and it can't get through, so it just swells up, and so you can't get your boots on properly. All these things. It's the constant assessing what are you doing? How can I do this better? Between the two of us, we're very different. Phil and I. Phil's the strong, silent type, very considered, very on the the sort of in your face. I'll leap into anything, where Phil will stand back and give it consideration.
Right.
I'll always look for something else, and he'll just keep on going on. And so between the two of us, we brought these two different views of where we were at and what we were doing. And every minute of every day, every hour, we would be negotiating between ourselves on, shall we try again? Shall we not? Shall we try again? If you speak to Phil now, he'll probably go, we probably should have tried one more time, But, who knows? You don't know. And there's a saying in mountaineering, every mountaineer dies with a surprised look on his face, because you never thought it was going to happen to you. And every decision you make, is the right one until the one that will actually kill you. And so with two people negotiating that, and so it seems, 324 hours doesn't actually seem all that long to me these days, stuck in a little thing about the size of underneath an office desk. Lockdown, well, it's not so bad, It's if I locked down underneath my bed, that would be a bit more difficult, Or in fact, for me, if I was locked down in an MIQ room, just in a room in a hotel, I'd find that really, really difficult. if the window didn't open at the start of lockdown, it would be opening at the end, even if I had to use a glass cutter. I need to, I need, I get claustrophobic in various different ways, but a lot through people's thinking and everything else. But I need to be able to know that there's an opportunity to do something. And that was probably one of the hardest things. And so as after about the 5th day, and, that was sort of like a decision day, so we can only lie dead still. On the 7th day, the weather cleared just for an hour or two, and they were able to drop a bag of supplies to us that had a radio in it. And it lasted for about 18 hours, about 3 or 4 calls, and that was about it. Because those days batteries weren't very good, and it was very cold, and we probably left it turned on. But in that time, we were able to connect, and so people knew we were alive. They knew where we were, and that made it so much harder. They put Anne, my wife, on, and it's just like, you really don't need that,
Yeah.
After 7 days, you really don't need to hear the worry in her voice. Lucy was 10 months old. You really don't want to think of that when you have to think of survival. And so one of the hardest things was the last 6.5 days, just waiting for that rescue and knowing that we had to keep on doing the things that we could, but also knowing that, we'd spoken with our families, but really that was about it. And so it was always orientating yourself to what can I do in the situation that I'm in. So there's no good wishing. It doesn't work up there. I had hallucinations in the last probably couple of days up there, starting to get a chest infection. We'd lost so much body weight, we're lying on the cold ice, and I was pretty skinny anyway, and so I lost a lot more body weight by percent than Phil. He had a lot more muscle and a lot more mass, and so I was getting pretty ill, and I was hallucinating. All I could see was this big street going up a hill, and it was covered in snow, and all I had to do was walk up it in bare feet, and I knew once I got to the top, my family and a warm place would be there, and that was just going through your mind. And luckily those things didn't last for long. It was that constant reorientating yourself, working out, what can I do now? You put a wee bit of ice in your drink bottle and you put it underneath the outside layer of your clothing, because if you put it in any further, you take too much heat out of your body, too many calories, you die. And so the heat that's going to leave your body, leave the last layer of clothing, and it would melt about, a shot glass, a shot a day. And so we didn't have a shot of vodka or whiskey or anything else. We had one little shot of water a day, and that was it. And so just melting that all day, it's a bit like watching grass grow, watching ice melt, like that. But it's those little things and it's the understanding that if you lose that faith that someone's coming to get you, or if you don't know that they're coming to get you, then that's when people die really early on. Recently we had 2 relatively experienced climbers. They were actually in text range even of rescue, and they had given up. They didn't understand that people were coming for them, and within 2 days they had died. That a whole bunch of reasons. They weren't out of the wind enough. They needed to be out of the wind more. All these things, but a lot of it is you have to focus on the positive. I always remember growing up, there was a saying that the only free thing in life is a positive attitude, and the most expensive thing you can ever have in life is a negative attitude. And that's exactly right. And I guess Phil and I are living proof of that.
Absolutely. And so moving into, obviously, as you shared, you're 23 on Christmas Day, you wake up to seeing the sheets sort of only go down half of the bed. And you talk about this sort of like reorienteering mindset in the cave of what sounds like it's quite highly practical. Was there sort of an adjustment period in the experience of sort of becoming a double amputee where you felt quite emotional of it? Like, was there grief or anything, or did you feel like you kind of slid quite easily into that lifestyle?
Oh, it's hard for everyone, and your attitude determines how long the hard part lasts, really, and so it's waking up on that Christmas morning. It was just like, it felt like you had your soul removed, really did. It was, there's no going back, even when you're being wheeled into theatre, before they get cut off, making jokes about make sure you get the right leg,
Right.
It's like, and things like that. But waking up and knowing that, your legs don't grow back, it's, you're not a tadpole, and, this is it. The disappointment and excitement of trying to stand up for the first time on new legs, that it was gutting. It was supposed to be better than that. It was in your mind, you had yourself leaping up and striding away, and here you are in pain and incapable. And it's that incapacity that, especially for a young mountaineer, that makes it really, really difficult. So the more that you can get your life back, take ownership, the better. In 1982, we didn't have enough support. In 1982, there was a wee bit of occupational therapy. There was, teach you to crochet, perhaps. There was physiotherapy, but probably not nearly as aggressive as now. There were no psychologists or psychiatrists to help. The nearest thing was they'd send a priest around. It was having to rely on yourself and your family, and right from the start, I'd always said, you cannot let me away with anything. It's the worst thing you can ever do is take pity on someone, and you have to give people their ability, their chance, even if they don't want it, to sorry about the pun, but stand on their own 2 feet. And that's one of the real challenges. We learned that pretty early on, and one of the best ways of learning it was part of our rehabilitation after about perhaps 2 weeks before we got legs. So we were in wheelchairs. We were put into the spinal unit because it's all set up for people in wheelchairs. All the benches are the right height. There was like a motel type and independent living and things like that. And you're wheeling around with a whole bunch of really amazing people, most of whom will never walk again. And you know that in a month's time, you're getting a set of legs and you're going to walk out of there. And if that doesn't ground you and make you work even harder for the opportunity you've got, then nothing would. And it's that was, I don't know whether they did it on purpose or not, but it was the most amazing thing for us. And it really just helps that mindset, because, it's life's, the sinusoidal wave. And every now and then I sink down. Most of the time I have what I call my trampoline of life, and I hit it and I sort of bounce back up before I go too deep. But probably as I've got older, I've found that less easy, actually. And I've had to go and get some help to find strategies to bounce back up, because otherwise, when you're my age, you just go out and you find ways to self-medicate and do other things. So, it's I get bored really easy as well. So, I'm a shocker. You don't want me as a patient. I'm a shocker.
Do you think that's been challenging for you, Mark, particularly, you're in New Zealand, you've experienced some lockdowns, being someone that gets bored easily? Do you feel like that has affected your mental health, not being able to sort of go do these things that you've been doing?
Not traveling for me has been the biggest. The last 10 years, I've been in India 4 to 6 times per year, sometimes
Wow.
10 times per year. I have very close friends. I was watching many of them get very, very ill. Some die through COVID. Also feeling guilty about how lucky we are, but also just being locked down. I took 3 hours of every day to go into the forest. I live in a wee alpine community and build a new mountain bike trail. So over our first lockdown here, I hand built a 1.7 kilometre mountain bike trail.
Wow.
It's called Southern Cross, and it's hand built. Thanks to COVID. Every now and then, I just think, well, the best training you could ever have was Middle Peak Hotel. That 13 and a half days. If you can do that, then crikey, you can do a bit of lockdown.
Yeah.
You just try not to put on too much weight. Yeah.
Don't put on that 30 kilos.
Yeah, exactly.
So with, you speak about the excitement of receiving new legs for the first time. And something that you're very well known for, Mark, is setting a world record of being the first double amputee to the summit of Mount Everest. At what point between that time did you decide that, this is something that I'm going to set out to achieve?
It's a wee bit incremental. We had the best advice ever from a really great registrar that we had in hospital. And he came and sat at the end of the bed one day and he said, you really need to understand this is going to take you years. It's not going to take you weeks. It's not going to take months. He said, in 6 months' time, you'll be really motoring around. You'll be great. You won't know how much you can do until at least 2 or 3 years. And then you'll really be hitting your straps. And then you can really look forward and just keep on going. And the biggest thing to remember is because somebody else hasn't done it, it's just because they haven't done it yet and you haven't tried it, and that's really how it started. It was about the thing I learned. One of the things with amputees and with many other disabilities is people always focus on the prosthetic. They always focus on the technology and everything else, when actually 95% of the growth in Paralympics and in everything else is actually the people behind it, are the people that stand in the socket. It's their attitude. It's their vision to overcome what other people see as being the limitation. And that's exactly what you need to do. And so I've always understood that the limbs that I make for climbing, for cycling, for gardening, for trekking, for ice climbing, everything, they're 5% of what I do. 95% of what I do is how my stump fits in the socket. And I've had to learn to be able to not just be able to enunciate that to my limb fitter, but actually do it myself. And so I don't take a fleet of limb fitters with me where I go. I take a little battery-powered Dremel tool and a whole bunch of parts, and I do it myself. And that's been the most, I think, the thing that's allowed me I'm not quite sure of the word that I'm looking for, not enlivening, but enabling thing that I've done, because it's taking responsibility back on yourself.
Right.
Now, to a certain degree, it's actually, I don't want to sound a grumpy old man, but it is a wee bit easy to give away all of the responsibility of your life at the moment. And so you really need to be a wee bit careful, and you need to grab some back. And if you've got some good people working with you, they will make sure they'll give it back to you. But for some people, they rely on everyone else to perhaps an extent that they need to learn that it's so much of it comes from in here and here. And so it's that, but a lot of that's learned. Some of it's innate, but there's a lot around the experiences that I work a lot with youth because I'm really concerned that when youth look out into the world, that their window's only about that wide, and they're looking out into the world in a window that's really limited, and perhaps because of their socioeconomic status, because of their cultural status or whatever, that they don't get, like I had when I was young as a mountaineer, they don't get that big window. And without that big window, you can't be able to pick and choose all these different experiences. And so that's one of the things that I try and take to people. It's that I'm not telling them my story for my story. I'm telling them the story of the whole new world that's actually out there. You know, I can look out my window right at the moment, out at a lovely peak, Mount Isabel and Mount Dunblane.
Wow.
You know, and quite often at night, of a summer's night and sometimes a winter's night, I'll throw a bivvy bag or a tent in my pack, and the dog and I will head on up, and I have little spots up there, and I'll just chill out for the evening, you know, and Anne can watch whatever she likes on TV that night, you know, and I can see our house from up there. And so, and it just, it opens up, it gives you that visualization, I think. And so it's the breadth of the window that you look out into the world in, and that's only built on the experiences of your life. So the more experiences we can give people, and if they can't have them directly, then it's up to us to try and describe them, which is exactly what you do.
And talking about breadth of window, what did influence you to have such confidence in becoming the first double amputee to summit Mount Everest?
Well, you see, for me, it's just a natural thing. You know, it's not about having it. The confidence was always there, and it was just learning to putting enough effort into my stunts, learning enough. You know, I rode at the Paralympics in Sydney, most amazing games. Every Olympics should be in Sydney. What a fantastic event. You know, Paralympics in 2000, I got New Zealand's first silver medal, first medal ever in cycling at Paralympics, a silver on the Dunkgrave Velodrome. Had an amazing experience, you know, missed the gold by 0.2 of a second.
Wow.
You know, my coach told me it's because I had a stupid grin on my face the whole way around, you know. And so,
that seems worth it.
Yeah. But coming back from that, it was like the thing that I knew when I still carry the medal. It's in my bag just beside me. Carry the medal everywhere because it's a reminder that standing on that podium in Sydney, all I could see in my mind's eye was the summit of Aoraki Mount Cook, because I knew from the summit of Aoraki Mount Cook and the summit in my mind's eye, I'd be able to see the summit of Everest. And so it's about, I came home and a year later climbed Cook again, and then, you know, always knew I could do Everest. All my mountaineering friends always knew I could. You know, Russell had always kept a space on his expedition for Inglis, you know, and being a good mate, he only charged me 10% more than everyone else. You know, it's like, and when you have mates like that, you know, mountaineering mates are the most grounding mates you'd probably ever have, because they've been and done it, and they just haven't made as many mistakes as I have, you know. But then we've got lots of friends that have made more mistakes than I did, and we don't have them anymore. And so it's a pretty brutal world that you live in, and it's not a world where you can hide. There's not a world where you can, if you excuse the expression, bullshit people, you know, because your actions are actually measured really quite brutally on a mountain. And it's that gives you the confidence. I knew I could do it. They all knew I could do it. And it was just like, let's get on with this.
And for some of the listeners that may not sort of have that innate sense of confidence, what would you advise them in order to develop more of that confidence?
Experiences. That's what you have to do. You know, I take treks back to Nepal, and for everyone on those treks, you know, it's probably for 99% of them, it's the most extreme thing they've ever done. For a lot of them, they have a lot of worry about whether they'll be able to do it, and some actually can't. but that's okay. We always find a way in which they can have a great experience, even if they don't get to where we're going. And so it's about, but every one of them have come back and they've gone on and done more things. And so it's the incremental building up of experience, which builds up self-confidence in yourself. It's about surrounding yourself with people that don't tell you no all the time. It's just like, sure, learn, get some instruction and give it a whirl, and that's the big thing. None of my kids are mountaineers, but they all have gone on and done different things. And in every case, it's, of course, you can do it. And if you can't, then, well, you've learned that and you'll be able to learn what else you can do. And so it's that acceptance of you can't do everything. I'm not very good at that. The understanding that there's always a lesson to be taken. And sometimes that's pretty hard to remember, especially if something hasn't worked out, that there's a lesson in there somewhere. You have to take it and then stride forward. A lot of people spend a lot of time looking over their shoulder. And when you just get a recovering from your amputation, it seems such a long, drawn-out affair. And every now and then it's good to look over your shoulder and you're really surprised at how far you've come. But in the rest of life, quite often you're looking over your shoulder and having regrets about the things that you've done. Perhaps, well, it's actually too late. Either do something about it or keep on looking forward. And so it's those little things. So the first thing is go out and have an experience. Get some instruction. If you want to go climbing, go to a guide. Go to instruction. Don't go and try it yourself. It's some of the things that you get the most amazing buzz out, that you get the biggest achievement, adrenaline, endorphins from, are the things that will probably kill you. Mountaineering is probably one of the biggest. And so it's also one of the most controllable, because it's knowledge that really, really, it's knowledge and skill. And you can only get that by learning from other people. So go out and learn from other people.
And talking about that adrenaline, I heard you say, and I'm not going to quote it here, but you said something along the lines of being on the summit of Everest was one of the proudest moments of your life, and going back down was one of the hardest. Could you share with us sort of that experience of being on the summit and what that felt like, but also realizing you were only halfway done?
Oh, the summit of Everest, pretty scary place. Climbing Everest for me, I was in my element. I've been a mountaineer my whole life. For me, you forget your legs, everything. I did the second fastest ascent of Everest on the day that I did it, of all the people that summited that day, the 12 or 13 that summited that day, and of the 37, I think, that started that day. And so, for me, going up is like, just get out of the way. And so I did the last steep snow slope was hard blue ice with about waist deep, super cold powder, minus 50 degrees Celsius. And I was the only second person up, and I was having to make tracks for the rest of the team to come up behind me. And I'm the double amputee, and I said, got halfway out and I said, somebody else can have a turn. They go, no, you're doing okay, keep going. They're hard people, mountaineers, hard people. And so you're just so focused, and those last few steps are just so hard. Like my oxygen wasn't working, so I had no supplemental oxygen. I was getting really, really cold. And you get to the top and you look around and you think, everything else is a bit lower.
Right.
It's like, it's looking a bit
pretty
flat.
high up here.
It's pretty high. It's like, touch the top and get out of there. One of the on Everest knowledge is essential, and one of the key things you need to understand is 80% of the deaths happen on the way down. Long-term average, when I did Everest, 1 in 14 died, and so you need to be able to have the knowledge to make sure that you're not one of them, not just wish you weren't one of them, or have the self-confidence not to be one of them, but the knowledge. And so it's that whole understanding, the training, everything. And the whole culmination of it is standing on the top to a certain degree. But I was just so focused, because for a double amputee to go down is about 4 times harder than going up. Just the way that your legs work, they just don't work properly going down. The weight goes into the wrong place, your stumps agonizingly sore. And so that you can turn around and face in, but it's like having to go backwards down the whole way. And so I knew my biggest challenge was to get off the mountain, and it was the hardest thing I've done in my life. Was climb down Everest. Climbing up, that was one of the highlights of my life. But climbing down was by far the hardest thing. The whole 10 days from the summit of Everest back to New Zealand, and it was so cold that after my hands and everything surviving fine for 13 and a half days on a middle peak in 1982, after 8.5 hours on Everest, that's what you end up with. 60% of the people on Everest in 2006 lost some part of a limb due to frostbite. It was that cold that year.
Wow.
It was a clear, cold year. And so it was a brutal time. But the most amazing time is when you get down to advanced base camp down below the North Pole, and you turn around and you see that view that's virtually there behind me. And all you have is this thudding in your chest. And it's like, I did that. I did that. I'm not sure how, but I did that. And it's something that no one can take away from you. People can tarnish it and do whatever they like with it, but they can't take it away from you. And that's the real adrenaline rush of mountaineering. That's the reason you go back. That's the reason that you go back and you think, "Ooh, I could do that better next time," or I could do something harder next time.
Right.
I'd be back on Everest tomorrow. Apart from the divorce that would be ensue, So it's
that's fair.
Yep. So, and that's pretty fair. So that's why I just take treks and quite happy to stand at the bottom and look up and share the environment with people now. Yeah.
And what do you think one of the biggest lessons has been that you learnt from that experience that possibly you use in your life now? How brutal social media can be. Really? Why do you say that?
Well, on our day, a young English climber died, and we weren't able to do anything to help him. On the way down, we took turns to sit with him until he passed away. And because I was high profile on the mountain that day, for some reason, all those people out there in the big wide world of WWW decided that I didn't do enough to save him, and he wasn't able to be saved. But we brought all of his belongings back to his family and have connected with them. Not me, only slightly, but the Russell, the leader, a lot. And for some reason, we got back to Kathmandu and everything was fantastic. By the time we got to Bangkok on the way home, Anne wasn't letting me look at the laptop because all the death threats and everything were coming through.
Wow.
And it still happens to this day. Anytime one of the documentaries on Everest plays around the world, because I need to be available, because that's what I do, then your inbox fills up and you go, oh, that's playing in the eastern United States at the moment,
Wow.
or it's playing in South America or some other place. And there's a lot of nutters out there in the world. And so the one thing I've had to learn to do is to deal with that, is to be able to live on social media, but also be able to filter it. And that's what I think a lot of our young people who perhaps haven't had experience, or even some of the older people that haven't had perhaps the life experience, don't have the skills to do. And there's some really tragic, as we know, results from that. And so it's about understanding that. But the thing about Everest was that if you can do that, you can do anything. If you can stand on the top, it's the always say that I'll never be the equal of an able-bodied mountaineer because I don't have legs. I'm 20% down in power compared to an able-bodied mountaineer, no matter what I do. Well, I can be the equal of any mountain I choose. And that's the most important thing we can do in life, is that not just be equal to the mountains that get put in front of us. And COVID's been a pretty big mountain, and it's got multiple peaks. And so the challenge to everyone is just don't be the equal to it, but be greater than it. Stand on the top of it, look to find the next peak and work at it, because that's what we need to do. And it's that attitude that hopefully that Everest has just reinforced for me, and continually does it. And it's also all of those other skills that it brings in, all of those other understandings of yourself. And that's pretty hard for a 62-year-old Kiwi male. It takes a bit of thinking, and it takes a bit of self-honesty. But you never quite know whether it is. It's one of the great techniques that I learned in my corporate life as a senior winemaker at Montana. We had to go through a great culture change, and from a really competitive company to a very collaborative company. And so much of that culture change was around about how small teams can work together in total trust. But for a small team to work together in total trust, each individual has to be able to have the skill to be able to stand outside of yourself and look back in and see yourself as others can see you. Don't have to believe it, but you have to understand it, because there's no other way that you can understand people's compliments and their criticisms of you. I lost probably almost a decade of really going forward, because I had people coming up to me all the time through the mid-90s and early 2000s, people going, "Mark, you're doing great, you're doing fantastic." And I was going, "I know, fantastic, thank you." It's like, they aren't double amputees. They didn't know, and I took my foot off the virtual accelerator. And as soon as I really got to understand that, understand that when people look at me, the first thing they see is a double amputee. But I don't want them to see that. I want them to see Mark. And so I have to filter out all of that. And it's those filters that we have that are just so important. The filters that we need to use when we engage on social media, the filters that we have to use, even just when we meet people in the street. I've never worn longs. I always wear shorts, because I need to take my legs off and on multiple times a day to get them to fit properly. You don't want to see me, dropping my strides in the middle of the main street. There's enough people that do that already. So I wear shorts, and I really don't care. And I'm proud of the way I walk. And so people think that I wear shorts because I want them to see my legs, but it's not that at all. In fact, it's the opposite. I'd rather they didn't, but I do it for a practical reason, and then I filter out their interaction around that. And so it's all those things that really have to come in, but we're still learning every day, aren't we?
We definitely are. And obviously, you've lived such a full life and you've achieved so much. Do you feel the pressure or even the motivation to continue to achieve a lot, or are you sort of at a time in your life where you're sort of just more enjoying the experience of everything that you do?
A bit of both, but it's the pressure on myself, not people's pressure on me. There's a lot of people I know that would rather I did less, whereas I tend to want to do more, and I have to pull myself back. And so it's I'm still work in progress, and life's work in progress. And so it's being brutally honest that I won't be doing any more really big mountains. I know that. Good. Put that to one side, and where's your next mountain? We have our charity. We work in Cambodia, where we provide the facilities for disabled kids to go to school, which the government doesn't do. And so in Nepal, we supply all of the rough terrain wheelchairs. And so it's finding other outlets really that keep me occupied, keep me inspired. The truly amazing thing is that we've lived in the same place here in Henna Springs for 16 of the 19 years that we've lived here. 19 years in one place, unheard of for Mark, unheard of. 16 years in the one house, unheard of. You know, we'd moved 11 times before we got here. Wow. You know, and it was, but because I can leave, I have new experiences. Because I have this mountain next to me, I've got my mountain bike. You know, I've got, I love to ski. And every time you get on it, it's a new challenge. And so it's always making sure you got those things in life that keep you stimulated, that have all those new challenges. But I've always got one eye out looking for a new thing, you know. So 4 years ago, the local Trails Trust really needed some help. So I stepped up and created a contracting company and contract to them and get projects across the line that volunteers will never quite do. And so it's also raising the awareness, raising the understanding of how much more just locals can do. And so it's all of those things. It's about empowering people to help themselves. And when they don't do that, I just roll this bulldozer straight over the top of them. Yeah. So, but that's right.
Yeah, I feel like it's such a beautiful lesson, like medicine to the soul of that element of contribution in your life, and getting out in nature, I think, are just two of the most powerful things that you could do in your life. And I certainly do that in my own life as well. What do you think, you know, over your entire lifespan, and as I've already shared, you've lived such a full life. Out of all your different experiences, what do you think that you're truly grateful for now?
A family that stuck with me, because it hasn't been necessarily all that easy at times. And the love that all of us have and the tightness that we have as a family is just a real joy, you know, real joy. So that for me, but the biggest thing is the insights that I've seen to other cultures, the insights I've seen into myself, but also the insights I've seen into the way other people live in other parts of the world. And it makes you feel pretty privileged, really. And it can make you a bit frustrated when you understand that a lot of people don't understand that, you know. A lot of people need to get out there. Unfortunately, travel's a bit difficult at the moment. So I can't preach my normal, you know, if you haven't got a passport, then you should have one and you need to get out and use it. Because it's even if you don't like where you go, when you come back, you'll always have memories of it, and it'll affect the way that you think about everything else in your life. And so when we think about how we look out that window I've got right here beside me, when I look out that window, I'm looking out of it with 62 years of experience, 62 years of traveling the world, of pushing myself to and past what most people consider limits. You know, for me, having a wee trim up on some fingers after Everest, that's just occupational hazard, you know. That for me was the price.
Right.
And I'm happy to pay that. That's no problem for me. Whereas for most people, that would be an abomination, you know. And so they really don't understand. But for me, that's, I can do that. And so I need to be a wee bit careful as I'm getting older, because I go, yeah, I can do that. And then I find out I can't. So I haven't had a flight in a rescue helicopter. So I'm the ambassador for them. So I'm trying not to do that. So, yeah, so I'm trying to be a wee bit careful. So it's that, it's just that understanding that everything's out there. You're bringing this big, long comet tail of experiences along with you. And if a few of them flick off to the side to help people, then, hey, that's a bonus in life.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for this conversation. I deeply appreciate it, and I've certainly learned a lot from you and really honour everything that you have achieved.
Thank you. It's in the minutes before I joined you here, I was 100 kilometres out in the back country of the St James Conservation Area, standing on the edge of a river, working out where I'm going to take a bulldozer over the next couple of days to repair a whole bunch of flood damage, so cyclists can get down there. And so, that to have that blend of life, to come here and then enter into your world, Jennah, thank you. Enter into the world of all the people that are listening, watching. Thank you. Just remember, experiences are out there for the grabbing. Let's go get them, eh?
Beautiful. So, Mark, on a final note, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you to be human?
To be human in many ways is to be fallible, is to have feelings, is you're not a machine. So to be human is that you're this bag of bones and muscle and homeostasis, but you're more than that. You've got the brain attached. You've got everything. When people ask me, am I the same person that I was before I lost my legs? I point out that the only thing they cut off were your legs. They don't cut off the main part of being human, and that's your soul. That's your soul and your intellect. And if you've still got that, then you've got everything.